In one of my previous videos, I talked about the universe and why I believe the universe has been finely tuned in a manner that allows life to exist, and how the odds against life existing are therefore tremendous, and why I believe this indicates divine design. A number of people responded, some in agreement, some in disagreement. Some responded politely and civilly, and frankly some responded with great venom, by hurling insults and all sorts of derision. I try to respond to all of these as best I can. Time does not allow me to respond to all of them, and certainly when a response is filled with insults and anger and condescension and the like, I'm much less likely to respond, frankly because I think it would often be a waste of time. Oftentimes I do try to respond anyway, especially in a public forum, but I'm not always able to because of time constraints. If you're abusive enough, I might even block you. I do want to respond to some of the objections that were raised though, especially one of them known as the Anthropic Principle. I'll be focusing on that later on. In brief, some of the objections that were raised can be classified into the following categories. One is coincidence. Some say, well, maybe it's all just a coincidence that the conditions were just right for life to exist. Well, maybe, but it's a cop-out. It's not a scientifically satisfying answer, nor is it philosophically satisfying. Saying it's a coincidence, you could excuse all sorts of bizarre things that way, all sorts of improbable events. You need to dig deeper than that. Some say maybe there are no other possibilities. Maybe it's not possible for a universe to exist that would not support life. And there's just no scientific evidence for that. There's no good reason to believe that. In fact, the evidence is the other way around. Physicists are stunned at how much more probable life-prohibiting universes are than life-permitting universes. There's just no support for the position that only a life-permitting universe could have developed. Some say, well, mere improbability is not sufficient grounds to infer design, and I agree, which is why I spelled out other criteria that we must consider as well. This is covered in the previous videos. Some say, well, maybe there are multiple universes, and if you have enough universes, surely at least one of them will support life. I'd like to devote another video to this in the future. To cut a long story short, there are scientific problems with that view, and philosophical problems as well, not the least of which is that there's no evidence for multiple universes. If we go by what the evidence actually says, we can't assume the existence of these other universes. And we got to go where the evidence points us, rather than deciding on a conclusion and then speculating on other scenarios that might possibly support that conclusion that we wish to arrive at. The objection I want to focus on right now is the Anthropic Principle. A number of people responded by saying, hey, you know what will explain this? You know what will explain this fine-tuning of the universe? The Anthropic Principle. You should read this book, and so forth and so on. This frustrated me. It frustrated me because I devoted a rather large section of the video, about a third of the video by my recollection, to the Anthropic Principle. I'm fully aware of what it means, and I don't believe the Anthropic Principle adequately addresses the issue of the universe's fine-tuning. It doesn't address that issue at all. It sidesteps it for reasons that I gave. Now, I wanted to kind of reiterate these points for emphasis, because apparently this objection keeps coming up over and over again, and it's not an adequate answer to why the universe is so finely tuned, why it gives the appearance of design. It doesn't even begin to answer it. It sidesteps that issue completely. And so consider this an introduction to that segment of the video that I mentioned earlier, in which I make this part explicit. I'd like to talk about why the Anthropic Principle does not explain the appearance of design in the universe. Other people object by invoking what's known as the weak anthropic principle. What does this mean? Well, this principle basically says that We should not be surprised that these constants were fine-tuned to an incredible degree. After all, if this had not happened, we would not be alive, and therefore we would not be alive to marvel at their incredible fine-tuning. I think that's a silly argument though. It sidesteps the issue completely. It's kind of like driving off a cliff, hurtling head down to what seems to be certain doom, somehow miraculously surviving, and then dusting yourself off, patting yourself and saying, well, I'm not surprised that I survived. After all, if I had been dead, then I would not be alive to marvel at my incredible good fortune. Or to use a more classic example, it's kind of like standing in front of a firing squad with 100 trained marksmen aiming straight at you, hearing the command being given out to shoot, hearing the roar of gunfire, then when the dust settles, patting yourself saying, hey, I'm alive. Well, I should not be surprised after all. If I had been dead, I wouldn't be here to marvel at my good success, at my good fortune. Any sane person would be right to suspect that these marksmen deliberately missed, or that they had been given blank ammunition. Saying that you were alive to marvel at your incredible good fortune sidesteps the issue completely. It sidesteps the issue of why these highly improbable events occurred. In other words, the weak anthropic principle is not an answer at all. In short, I think we do have good reasons to believe that God exists based on this incredible fine-tuning of conditions that are necessary for life to exist on Earth, or on any planet for that matter. Life-permitting universes are vastly less probable than life-prohibiting universes. This is like winning the lottery over and over again. We should begin to suspect something, and I think we are right to suspect that there is a designer behind it all.